Yeah, it is probably. Yeah. Okay. Okay, so the purpose of this video is to draw attention to parts of a rubric um, so that people can see some of the strengths and weaknesses of rubrics. And this, I'm using this as an example because it contains many of the features that are both very good and aren't so good, and also throws up a few questions for us to ask as well. So I'm going to start with this point here. Do a little bit by a little bit. You're going to be cutting a lot out of this. That'll do, won't it? Okay. Beginning with this column, or this point here, we see that in this rubric there is only one fail column. So for anything under satisfactory or under pass, we only have one level or standard. That's actually a really good feature because you don't want to be grading levels of failure unless it's suitable for the task itself. So that's actually a really good feature, just the one column. You'll see above that, just zoom out. Oh, far out. Okay. You'll see above that, these people have 4 standards. That's they correspond to a pass, a credit, a distinction, and a high distinction, but you don't have to stick to this rule. That is a very common rule of thumb, but it's not necessarily needed. The reason is, God, I don't know what I'm saying. There's a good argument to have just 3 standards above the pass. Then they won't necessarily align to pass, credit, distinction, and high distinction. And that's not a problem because for one particular assignment, pass, credit, distinction, and high distinction aren't meaningful. Those words are usually used for the final grade of a course, and assignments don't have to adhere to those particular grades. Of course, it depends on the policy of your school or discipline whether or not you have 4 or fewer standards. The advantage of having fewer standards is that you need to write less descriptors and that there are fewer words on the page. We're just going to, I was going to pause that. Anyway, so is that all right? Do you think you can cut that up and make that sound all right? Okay, so that's point 1, but I'm sure it could be a bit more condensed. So let me know. Yep. So 1, standards. Yeah. Okay. All right. It would be logical for me to go to the criteria next, but I wanted to keep those till last because they're the most complicated, or they're most controversial. So let me know what you think when it all comes up in the wash. Yeah. Okay. I'll just plus is down. Okay, go for it. Okay. So now I'm going to draw attention to the wording used for the standards themselves. The word satisfactory is not problematic if you mean satisfactory to relate to satisfying the outcomes that are associated with the assessment. However, above average in the next column here, as you can see, is a poor choice of word. The reason for that is that average implies a comparison with others, and that relates or brings up notions of norm reference testing, and we don't do norm reference testing. These rubrics are criterion referenced testing or assessment. So we avoid things like above average, those words to be avoided. I should just move that over. Right. On the other hand, excellent and outstanding are reasonable titles for the standards up the top. Okay, that's sort of the standards. That wasn't straight, but anyway, that's all right. So, right, the next bit is this bit. I'll just straighten that up. Sorry, I'll just keep getting it. That line is not straight with the paper. No, it's not. It's not the thing. It's actually the machine. So you think you've got it straight, but you don't. Okay. The next point I'd like to make is the use of the next point I'd like to don't laugh. The next point I'd like to make is the use of the HD. I did allude to this before. DCP terminology to indicate the levels of achievement, and also the percentage values at the top. This task is actually out of just scrap that. I just added it up and he's out of 100. Okay. Maybe, yeah. Okay, scrap that point. I'll make that point so. What an idiot. My point was going to be that if you are going to use percentages, you should use the actual marks, not percentages. Yeah. Because then somebody has to make a calculation. The person reading it. Well, actually, in fact, they still do. And I should still make that point, come to think of it. Because you have to find 30%, you have to find a percentage of 30 in order to give marks to that criterion. So I should, yeah. Sorry, I'm underprepared, aren't I? Let's do that again. Okay. I did actually go over this last night and this morning. You think I'd have it all down pat. And I hadn't actually spoken it through, but anyway. Okay, the next point to bring up is the use of percentages here as the mark indicators for each of the columns. As you will see, none of the cells actually contain an exact mark, depending on if the student actually performs at that level. Then the marker and or the student need to make some calculations based on percentages to figure out the exact mark per section. So I would advise that for each cell, if there are different weightings for the criteria, each cell actually contains a mark range. So when you indicate that cell to the student, then the student is able to ascertain where they fall within that range more exactly. And you are able to calculate the grade correctly. That makes sense? Good. I mean, once you get over trying to be like perfect, I suppose it's not that. I feel like I'm speaking really formally too. Is it too formal? Not really, not for a video. Okay. For me? Yep. All right. I will for this one because I need to do that. Like what you were doing. Yeah. Okay. I'll do my best. Okay. The next thing I'd like to draw attention to are the descriptors themselves. Each of these cells contains a descriptor, and that describes the quality of the work that you're indicating the student has achieved. So I've already said that bit, so all I need to do now is talk about these ones in particular. Now this is actually a really difficult concept to explain, so I'll do my best, and if you can let me know if it makes sense to you, and I'll try a different way. I've never nailed this description. I want to do it now. Okay. In looking at this particular rubric, we see in the excellent area here that the student has provided a detailed identification of a decision-making model and details the process which brought about their decision. This descriptor does not tell the student why they have not reached an HD standard. The student then has to go to the HD standard to figure out what it is that they need to do better for next time. This is not advised. It's advised that you actually capture what the student has done wrong or the limitation in their work in the descriptor for the grade that you're giving them. So if we have a look at the high distinction level here, we see the difference is that at a high distinction level the student has provided a complete and accurate identification, whereas in the excellent range the student has provided a detailed identification of a decision-making model. Now, a student can then ascertain from that what they need to do next time, perhaps, that is if they can understand the difference between detailed and complete and accurate. But many students won't. But if you want students to understand this as feedback, that can be quite complicated for the student to understand. Oh God. So, my suggestion would be in this particular cell here that some sort of statement that tells the student their work isn't completely complete or completely accurate, it actually gives that feedback to the student. So, I would suggest provides a detailed identification of a decision-making model, etc., etc. There are minor omissions or inaccuracies just at the bottom of this, just to give that particular feedback to the student. Similarly, the standard down from excellent does something very similar, provides a description of a decision versus provides a detailed identification of a decision-making model. I should do that again because I just read it wrong. Am I making sense? Does that make sense to you? You sure? Okay. Okay. Looking at the credit level, the student has provided a description of a decision-making model. Compared to the excellent level, which is where they have provided a detailed identification of a decision-making model. I can see the difference there. The difference is in the detail. But it would be suggested that in this cell, if you don't want students to go and read other cells, if you have indicated this is the level of their work, that you add or build into this statement, there are some details missing. Okay. That makes sense? Okay, good. Because that's sometimes really... I guess I'll just finish by saying that on that point that the the main rule of thumb would be to write the top level, and then the next level down would be very similar but contain something along the lines of, however, there are minor limitations or errors with regards to whatever it is. The next level down would have more errors, and the next level down would probably have some major errors. And of course, unsatisfactory would contain too many really bad mistakes. You can actually stop that halfway down because I went off the page anyway. Are you seeing that? Oh, no, you're not. Okay. Alrighty. It's really warm in here, isn't it? No, that's okay. Okay, still on the descriptors. I note in this final row here that the instructor has headed each of these boxes with excellent and good. There are two problems with this. The first one is that excellent is the title, as you can see. Excellent is the title of the column of the standard just below. So this should really, if you are going to use this word, this should really be outstanding. And this should really be excellent, just to match the column headings. Having said that though, I wouldn't even include those statements to reduce the amount of words in each of the cells because the heading already tells you the level. So they're not necessary at all. What comes after that heading is what defines what excellent is. Okay, what else have I got? Okay. I'm almost covered everything, but it's a good learning experience because I can probably do it more fluid. Well, we'll see what happens anyway. Should we just see what happens out of this one? Yeah. Oh, all right. Yep. Yep, okay. I'm just going to move that across. My next point relates to this weighting of this particular criterion. The criterion is communication. I presume... Okay. That happens. Oh, you can't shut the door properly. Yeah, it's such an echoey place, isn't it? I'm just going to move that back down again, sorry. Okay, the next point I'd like to make is about the weighting given to this particular criterion, communication. Presumably, that criterion relates to the quality of communication. Actually, scrap that because I just read across it and it doesn't. I knew this. It actually... Okay. No, you can cut that. And then now I'm going to go... what is meant by communication becomes clear when you read across that particular row. And we notice that it is about the number of skills the student has used in communicating. You'll see that at the top level, the next level down and the next level down, all communication skills are used. Okay. But at a satisfactory level, at least 2 communication skills are used. I just picked up another issue, which I probably should address right now. So we might have to cut move things around a little bit. Only at least 2 communication skills are used. Well, the difference between here and here, I'm not aware of how many communication skills I need to use. So if 3 was the maximum, then I could still reach this standard by using at least 2 communication skills. No, that doesn't make sense, does it? Okay. So the wording at least means you've used 2 or more. But the standards above are the more. So you'd have only 2 communication skills if you were going to penalise them. I might have to work on that. Yeah, you just wouldn't use the word at least, because if I used 5, I still meet that criterion. So what you need to say is, here, yeah, it limits a baseline. It states it expresses a baseline rather than a maximum for that level. Yeah. So the other thing about this particular criterion is that it is, in effect, with these 3 requiring all communication skills, it is in effect a type of hurdle. Now, to have a hurdle marked at 30 out of 30 is actually quite it's unadvisable to have a hurdle marked out of 30, because it could affect the final grade really substantially. That makes sense. If I missed 1 communication skill, I will get between 50 and 64% of 30. That's a very hefty penalty for a student if they missed 1 communication skill. Yep. That makes sense, doesn't it? Ah, yes, it would be. Given that decision making and teamwork appear to be also as important, but they have multiple standards, it's a little bit questionable. I question why communication would be treated this way. Yeah. I might have to work on describing that. I just make it a hurdle requirement. Yeah. It doesn't make sense to have these different grades here at all, because there is no difference between an HD, a D and a C. So you may as well just have 1 box up here with all communication skills and then give it 100%. It doesn't make sense to give anyone 65% or 75% if the standard is exactly the same. That was crooked. That made sense, didn't it? Good. Okay, last thing I wanted to talk about, and this I'm actually thinking, to tell you the truth, about, I'll move it across, no, I'll move it in, no I won't, I'm thinking about making this like a separate one, like to say, because it's going to be really long and I don't want it to be long, and like to say to people that the criteria here are actually a little bit iffy, and because I have some suggestions for how to change it, and that makes it a distinctively different conversation, I think. Yeah. So I'll just sort of talk through it and see if I can explain it well. If we look at the criteria used for this particular assignment, we see that communication and presentation, we see that presentation is more of a quality given to the overall assignment. However, teamwork and decision making are sections of the assignment. In addition, communication, similarly to presentation, refers to the way that the assignment is presented. So we have a mixture of types of criteria in the one rubric. A different way to go about this would be to think about the qualities of the decision making and teamwork section and make these the criteria. So for example, if I look at the top level, outstanding, on both of these, I find the key indicators of what good quality work is. Completeness, accuracy, this is such a poor rubric. This is such a poor rubric. You know why? Because no, it's all right. I want to make a point, and this rubric's just getting in my way. I wanted to make a point that, see here, it's got examples, but there's no examples in the top one. Yeah. So examples are good, but you don't need examples in the top one. Well, that's interesting. That brings up another point about the descriptors, I suppose. Yep. And then I can finish what I was going to say. I was looking for the word example, going, I know it was there. Okay. I want to point out a common error when writing descriptors, and that is the use of similar or the same qualities of the work all the way through to describe the different levels. You can see in this particular line here, teamwork, that at the top level the student appears not to have had to use examples. However, in the descriptors below, for the quality of the work below, examples are included. This makes this particular line very inconsistent and will probably result in some difficulties with ascertaining the difference between these two grades. Okay, that'll do. And going back to what I was saying before, I'll start from the top again. Okay, so we're looking at the qualities of the work at a high standard. So we can see here, we can extract the qualities, completeness, accuracy, relevant examples, and here we also see a reference, use of an appropriate reference. So these are the qualities of both of those criteria. So my suggestion would actually be, instead of having the section of the assignment listed as a criterion, which they aren't, I would have completeness and accuracy, and I would have use of examples and supported by references. So that first one relates to the quality of the analysis. The second one would relate to the use of evidence and supportive arguments. If that's what you're looking for in both of those sections, they are better off being the criteria. And then overall, the assignment, if there are minor errors in either part relating to any of those criteria, that will then be falling into the excellent category rather than the outstanding category for the entire assignment. Is that okay? Yeah, that one is actually technical aspects. No. The whole it's good that you can say that, because if I can't explain myself well to you, and I know I know you do know a bit about education, so yeah, no, it's good. Thank you. Um, some people, it's interesting. Some people would possibly disagree with me because they want to see marks against sections of work, a section on decision making, or a section on teamwork. In some cases, um, in some cases, lecturers would split the task up into an introduction, a body, and a conclusion, and use those down here as criteria. However, they're not criteria. They are actually sections of the work. I'm not saying that's a bad thing to do. In fact, it's useful if you are teaching essay writing to a student. But if you are not teaching essay writing and you're examining the content that the students have learned, then it's best not to split up like that. It's best to think about what qualities of work you are hoping to get from the students overall. So the qualities of work represent the degree to which they've met the outcomes, but the degree to which they're able to, the standard at which they've met the outcome and what they've done to do it. So if I look to the top here and I see that in this section and this section, completeness and accuracy, I'm looking for completeness and accuracy, I would use that as a criterion. So that criterion is a quality of the work, completeness and accuracy. And then as you go down the standards here, you would have increasing or decreasing levels of completeness and accuracy as your descriptors. Okay? Yeah, okay. I'll use the other example too when they finish, like the examples and reference. Because I then want to suggest a name for those criterions. Criterions. Oh, what an idiot. Okay. If I look a little bit further at the top level here, and what I think the quality of the work is that the instructor really wants from the students. Maybe that's not too bad anyway. Maybe I should just talk through it and see what happens. Yeah? Okay. In looking further at further qualities that the instructor is looking for in students' work, we find here the use of relevant examples and an appropriate reference. When we see that, we could actually use that use of evidence as a criterion. So my next suggestion would be that the second or the third criterion would be use of evidence, and at the top level the student would have used appropriate examples and appropriate. At the top level the student would have used good examples and appropriately applied a reference to their argument. At the levels down from there, you will see that there will be a decrease in either the quality or number of examples or the quality of the use of evidence to make the argument. Okay. I think that'll do. This editing process is going to be really